I honestly think sections are some of my favorite drawings in architecture. They just bring so much life to the project and they allow you to visualize things that you can't usually see in a floor plan. So today I'm going to be showing you how I develop sections like these using a simple base plan to develop my project further. Welcome to Drawing in Architecture, Volume 3. The most important thing that a section actually shows is the cuts and the depth of information that you're showing. So using the correct line weights and understanding the structure within your building is critical. These sections should reveal relationships that you don't see in another view like a floor plan. So making the cut elements thicker and understanding the materiality of what you're cutting through and showing that is so important. It's also so important to note that you can go from a floor plan like this and just experiment in section. So let's get into tracing a section using this floor plan. So the first thing you want to do is you want to choose which part of the building that you want to cut through, the one that's going to show the most information in your section. So you see we have a staircase here and we have some sort of entry that goes here. But because these are all different levels, this is going to reveal so much about the project. So this is the part that I'm going to choose to cut a section through. And understanding which parts to cut through takes a little bit of time to understand what's important about your project. Everyone's project is going to be different, and usually you want to do maybe 2 or 3, so one short ways and a couple long ways. So I'm going to be cutting through just here, so I'm going to draw just a little reference line. This is just for my own purpose, so now when I grab my tracing paper, I know which parts to draw and which parts are beyond the section line. Line where I was cutting through for reference. And then I can begin to draw in these elements. So there's some sort of concrete wall which sits here. And at this stage, I'm just drawing them as solid boxes to give myself a reference to trace over afterwards. And there's some sort of staircase here, but that's beyond the section line. So once again, just drawing a box, maybe labeling it stairs. It's also important to note that this is to scale, so it's also important to note that this is to 1 to 100 scale, so I'm going to make these about 3 meters high up here, and then floor 2 above. I can begin to draw more of these walls. Maybe I want this to be a wall that sits lower, because you're actually entering outside, so, and the landscape goes down in this part here, and then when it meets here, I want there to be a concrete wall, which I'm just going to draw as a solid line for now. And when you're sketching in pencil, don't be afraid to overdraw your lines and just play around with stuff, because this is not permanent and you can always grab another piece of tracing paper afterwards. We have some trees behind here, so I'm just going to visually show those there. And then maybe there's a balustrade sort of thing that goes there. As you can see in this part here, we're actually cutting through this wall, which is very important to show that as a thick line, and then a bit lighter for these other elements, and then we'll draw the floor up here. Maybe I want this to be even a bit lower, because there's going to be some trees and plants in this space here. And we have some trees, this part. Over here we want some more steps up on the second level, because these stairs don't quite work, and I'm just going to add an opening into this second floor, a glass screen which sits up here, because production for the brewery is behind here, something that sits above that behind the glass. Not sure what that is yet, but this is the whole point of developing in section, because now I can see that something is happening in this core space here. Maybe there's this sort of a screen that happens, and when you get down to this other section here, it's actually going to get lower, because this is where our vineyard is going to sit, and we want people here to be able to look out to the vineyard. Another good thing to do even in these early stages is to just draw a little indication of a human figure, just so you understand the scale of the building. So this guy's gonna be able to look out here. Gonna be some sort of vineyard system happening over here. Now I can go over and do my section cuts. To landscape goes up. You can walk down, you can sit in that space, or you can stand up here. Maybe there's a balustrade up here where people can walk. We've got our existing wall here. We can start to draw these in much thicker lines because we're showing that we're cutting through that. And as you can see, we've got our existing wall here, and this is being cut through, but this isn't. So showing that in your section in this stage is crucial, because this needs to be lighter than this because this is being cut through. And now I'm just going to go ahead and refine all the missing pieces. Maybe there's a little glass roof up here. Don't be afraid to use wonky lines as well. I think it adds a lot of character to the drawing. Dash line, because this is some sort of production area with stuff coming out at the top. I'm starting to really get into the details of what's happening in this vertical space. I can just double check that everything's sort of lining up here. So I think I'm missing some trees. I think showing the extent of what's behind is so important because it shows depth in the drawing. You draw these in very lightly, but for this instance, we can just have a bit of fun with the line weights. So we have this concrete wall that sits here behind the building. So we're cutting through this point. This sits behind, so it's not going to be shown as thick, but it's still going to be there. And then maybe this canopy also comes out further. And so because the cut line is here, this area, we're going to show the internal space here and the external space here. Now we're just going to go through all the details in marker so that when someone looks at this drawing, they can clearly see that this is being cut through here and this is a section of the building. So now that I've got my base plan done, I can put some white paper behind because I sort of don't need to see the other drawing anymore as a reference. And I can just begin to what I've already done in pen. So we've got our 0.5 for now, and I've also got a 0.2, which I'm going to draw the extent of other things. Maybe I want this staircase to be solid and then change into a more open flight staircase up here. So as you can see, the depth is already starting to show with what's being cut and what's not. A little bit thicker 0.2 to add in a little details of showing materials. And then the extent of what's happening behind with this glass screen. So as you can see, when I'm doing this, I'm actually switching between the different pen types. Oh my goodness, it's raining so much. I'm gonna have to shut the window because it's getting loud. I love the sound of rain when I'm drawing, but not for the video. Here. That sits behind. And then in a very light pen, maybe even 0.1, I'm just going to draw a subtle extent of this background. It doesn't need to be thick at all, but it's just showing that there's something happening behind here. Staircase which sits off the wall, and our balustrade which sits up here. So as you can see, you can start to visualize how this balustrade works just by drawing it in section. It sort of starts over here and then goes up. That's smudging a little bit, but that's okay because this is just a development section. I'm just going to draw maybe this screen comes down. And then we have our little core set up. You can start to draw these other little details. And then the extent of what's happening behind. Just an indication that this is being cut. And using our 0.8, we can also, this louver that hangs over this side. It sits in the glass down here. So this is also being cut through. just going to draw the extent of what's happening behind, and the extent of what's happening behind here as well. Adding some. So as you can see, once you start adding this depth to what's being cut, it kind of becomes evident what's being shown behind, because these are much lighter lines than these floors. Just an indication of what's happening. Move into this part, which is being cut through. Maybe there's like a glass screen for the top window here. And don't be afraid to sort of look back at your plan and understand what these lines were, because I drew them in for a reason. So that's sort of indicating that there's a break in the joints of the concrete. Very lightly just indicating that there's some sort of vegetation, trees happening over here. And the louvers sit behind. And then don't forget that we drew some trees in here, so they're going to be shown. So we're sort of capturing how that's on an angle, because I'm giving the section these little joints and playing around with how these openings work in this space. I think this cut line needs to be a lot thicker, just like that. We can add in some materiality to that. All of these little details I'm thinking about while I'm drawing, and it becomes so evident when you're showing a project, all these little tectonic details happening. And I'm actually going to connect these two balustrades over here very, very lightly, like that. A little bit of definition with the floor. I'll make this glass screen a bit thicker as well. I want an opening to open up in the extent of the background very lightly, and then make this cut line thicker, some hatches. Then we can move over to this restaurant area with the vineyards, and it gets sort of natural landscape here, so I want these lines to be a little bit wonky and uneven. I wonder if this 0.05 works, because this will be perfect for the stuff that's way off in the background. This is sort of just an indication of what's happening behind. It doesn't have to be perfect, so we actually want to show that these people can see out here. That's our whole purpose of the drawing. My vineyards, I'm not sure actually how these work. Never been designing a winery before, but this is part of the design process, understanding and sort of visualizing how this could look. And then also drawing in these little arrows is so important, because you're showing the design intent of the section. And that's also linking back to why it's so important to choose an important part of your plan to cut a section through. So now I'm going to grab a very, very thick 4mm marker and just go through the ground line, because this needs to be thicker. So as you can see, after I've done that, the depth that this drawing now has after seeing that thick ground line, it just completely transforms how you read the section. I'm going to grab my 0.1 again, very lightly, that there's stuff happening behind here. Little hanging plants. Adding in just little indications of details happening just brings so much life to the drawing, because without it you're sort of just lost and you don't know that this is a glass panel. That pen is definitely running out of ink. So now I'm just having lots of fun with the detailing side of the drawing, adding in different layers of extents of what's happening behind. But also now we can begin to start shading in a bit of light. So obviously down here it's going to be quite dark, right? Because this is underneath the staircase. Grab our eraser, because we don't want that shading to go into the ground line. Light in this space, so we don't want to do too much here, because this is a glass opening. Obviously this shading is just an indication of how light it could be in this space, but showing that you're sort of thinking about it in a section brings so much depth to the drawing. Drawing in an indication of main structural points. When I take this further and put this back into my floor plan, it becomes pretty evident as to where the structure sits in the design. And I also like to add in a little bit of color sometimes, just a little hint of maybe this orange is the key structural points but not too much. You don't want to overpower the whole drawing. And it's a very strong graphic technique when you do it consistently throughout the drawing or multiple drawings. You can also do the same for the trees. But like I said, we don't want to overpower the drawing with all these different colors. It has to be very subtle. For our first development sketch, that is looking quite neat. So we can draw in our labels. Section 01, scale 1 to 100. Adding the labels isn't always necessary, but it is quite good to just give the viewer that extra bit of information. You can see that there's a dining area looking out to the vineyard. When someone looks at that, they'll be like, okay, I understand the whole intent here, and I understand what's happening in the project. So there we have it. We have a fully developed section drawing purely based off this master plan that I did in volume 2. And now I can use this section drawing and begin tracing different versions of how things connect within my project. And it really is that simple. I think understanding your project in this way becomes so important when you're designing. And for me, I think it's so much fun just playing around with all the little details that are happening in the project. I hope you guys enjoyed this volume of drawing in architecture, and I'll see you in the next video.